We are all interconnected. From our mind and brain to our inner bodily systems, to people around us, to animals, plants, and nature. Everything influences everything else in one way or another. From the Eastern philosophies I was brought up with here in Hong Kong to the lessons I've been learning from the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest, and now we're finding more and more evidence of this interconnection across nature, from the micro to the macro. I am a research and clinical psychologist, and since around 2017, I have been traveling to the Peruvian Amazon to study with the TEDxCUHK peoples, indigenous to the rainforest, to learn more traditional ways of treating mental ill health by working alongside nature, using plant medicines, and one in particular, ayahuasca. Ayahuasca essentially is a tea, and typically it's made of two plants, the Banisteriopsis cacti vine and the Psychotria viridis, also known as chacruna. And it's boiled down together over and over again until it becomes a thick, brown Amazonian brew, sometimes over a matter of days, and I gotta say, it smells and tastes disgusting. Much worse than the Chinese medicines my mom used to make me drink. And ayahuasca is really known for its profound visionary and body-cleaning properties. And due to its very high dimethyltryptamine or DMT content, it belongs to a very special class of medicines called the psychedelics. And over the last few decades or so, there's been a lot of research interest coming back to study psychedelics for a very unique ability to help one reconnect when used under the right circumstances. As a psychologist, when I work clinically, I often see that it is a sense of disconnection that underlies a lot of the mental health issues people face, and I think we've all been there to some degree, where we feel disconnected of ourselves, we don't like ourselves, we don't look after ourselves, to others, and we get into fights and arguments, and maybe we feel lonely, and also with our environment, and we feel like we don't belong. So therapy and recovery is often a process of reconnection. And with psychedelic research, we are seeing potential for helping reconnect at all levels, the biological, psychological, social, and spiritual. To illustrate this, there's a very classic study from back in 2014. For example, in the brain, we're seeing that psychedelics have the ability to encourage different parts of the brain that don't normally like to communicate to begin more free-flowing conversation and to interact more freely. And this looks like, for people, an improvement in their relationships, not just with other people, but also with themselves, with relationships, with substances, and also with nature, finding a meaning and purpose back in their lives again. And now when it's being trialed with common mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, we are seeing promising results. So back in 2017, I was very excited to explore the therapeutic potential of this psychedelic, ayahuasca. When I first got to the jungle, I was there just to study ayahuasca. I was there, that was my main focus, that was why I was there. And now looking back, it was almost naively so, because I was holding on to some hope that it would hold the key to a lot of the problems I faced with my patients. And I quickly learned that it was so much more. Well, firstly, ayahuasca is just one part of the world's most biodiverse stronghold of medicinal plants, that is the Amazon rainforest. And also, it sits in one of the most ritualistic, historical, cultural, and indigenous contexts. And the context is very important. As we learn that psychedelics can help the brain to interconnect, it means that it becomes more neuroplastic and more able to be flexible, relaxing old ways of being and thinking to allow new pathways and new ways of thinking to develop. And it is then the context within which we use the psychedelic that can help guide, scaffold, and shape the direction within which these new connections are formed. And these indigenous people, the Shipibos, they are really experts of this context and this setting. And when I say context, I'm talking about the social environment, I'm talking about the people we interact with during the experience, what our physical environment is, and internally as well, from our diets to our psychology. And the Shipibo people have spent hundreds, if not thousands of years, generations and generations, developing and refining a social safeguard or a ritualistic ceremony to help ensure that there is a container to allow these positive connections to form in the form of an ayahuasca ceremony. In the Shipibo tradition, an ayahuasca ceremony typically happens in a round circular structure considered sacred, called the maloka, like this. And everyone's given their own mattress where they are instructed to stay for the duration of the ceremony, and everyone's given a bucket with which they purge. And then, after sundown, in the cover of complete darkness, the ceremony would then happen for about 6 to 8 hours long before the shaman or the curandero, which is the name given to traditional doctors, would then give everyone their cup of ayahuasca before drinking him or herself, and then proceed to guide the ceremony with medicine songs called icaros for the duration of the ceremony. Now, as a musician myself, I love the icaros. I find them so fascinating. And the Shipibos believe that they're like state-of-the-art spiritual technology. Just like in this image, paralleling the commonalities between cymatics and Shipibo patterns called TEDxCUHK. The Shipibos believe that everything is vibration, and if we tap into specific frequencies, we are able to navigate specific conditions. And therefore, the icaros and these songs, they're not meant to sound good. They're not designed to sound good. I mean, they can sound good, depending on who sings it, but they are designed to be functional. And the best way I can describe them is they're quite clinical, almost surgical in their use, with very specific intentions and rhythms and melodies and lyrics for very specific conditions and ailments. There's icaros to help people for diagnostic purposes, for helping people through deep emotional trauma, for bereavement, for opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, and it's always dynamically tailored to what either the individual or the ceremony needs at that moment in time. It's freestyle, providing comfort when comfort is needed, and also grounding when grounding is needed. In neuroimaging research, we are seeing that music and psychedelics can invoke similar brain responses as well, where it can bring to the forefront emotional content and also dampen our intellectual and more logical thinking. Some studies have even found that music can sometimes exceed that of dosage when it comes to the therapeutic benefits in psychedelic sessions. In fact, one of the oldest traditions of using ayahuasca, sometimes just the shaman or the doctor would drink the ayahuasca, the patient would not, and then pretty much all of the therapeutic benefits would come from the music and the singing alone. One very interesting thing that the Shipibos do with their music and with their singing is that they like to sing to help them connect to the plants that they're working with. And it's almost like they're plant friends in the jungle through a process called the dieta. The Shipibos and the Amazonians, the indigenous peoples, they have a very special connection with nature and with plants. And it makes a lot of sense too, because they spend so much time with them. When you spend lots of time with anything, it kind of becomes a part of you and you kind of assimilate with that thing. For example, if you spend a lot of time with people, your mother or your partner, your colleague even, you start to think like them, talk like them, pick up their idiosyncrasies and maybe even finish each other's sentences. Same with animals. If you spend a lot of time with an animal, you might imitate each other's behaviors or body language, you even might share emotional states. And it's the same with plants. And just as how people have their way of being, so do plants. Some plants are big, tall trees that command the canopy. Others prefer to be in the shade and the undergrowth, whereas some like to be in the relentless sun with spikes and hard skin like the cacti. There are things that they're good at, things that they're not good at. Places where they thrive, places where they don't. And there are plants that work. Some plants work better with humans than others. Yeah. And maybe a good way to think of this is like the medicinal plants versus the poisonous plants. And the ones that work best with humans, the Shipibos call them the teacher plants, or the master plants. And in periods of isolation and fasting and maybe taking extracts of the plant, bathing with the plant, learning about the plant, the Shikibos are able to build a deep connection with the plant, dieta with the plant. One that is not just useful in their ayahuasca ceremonies, but also in their everyday life. Something about building a deep connection with your environment around you so it can help you out. But for us non-Amazonians who don't spend all our time trying to make plant friends, we tend to treasure more our relationships with people. In my recent current research, looking into the impact of ayahuasca on ex-military veterans, we're finding more and more the importance of community. And ayahuasca ceremonies can be very difficult, so especially for those who tend to be more isolated, having someone to share that experience with, to listen and be heard, to allow yourself to be vulnerable, can really help to foster that sense of social safety and community. And we often see that those who spend an ayahuasca ceremony together often go on to become friends for life, especially as you move on to the integration phase after the ceremony. So instead of simply drinking ayahuasca and hoping it'd be a silver bullet to all your problems, the Shikibos and the Indigenous elders, they teach us a lesson on interconnection. And I'm really grateful from my heart for these lessons, because they continue to ring true, even through the darkest storms, through times of war, deforestation, global mental health crisis happening right now, and especially for more Western societies that tend to overemphasize the importance of the individual, the Indigenous people, the collectivist cultures. They teach us a lesson of community, of family, of ancestry, and of nature. As a Western trained scientist, I'm often taught to isolate variables, to isolate everything to find out what caused what change. It's very good for that, don't get me wrong, but studying and researching with the Indigenous peoples, they teach me a lesson in taking a holistic, more integrated approach by not taking it out of context and upholding the practices and traditions ethically. And in Anaya, a research organization that I co-founded, we have set up a board of Indigenous advisors. And we work alongside the Indigenous peoples to collaboratively decide where we should focus the research, and then decide how we can change or translate science or tradition into science. And that's just one way that we can move towards this reconnection process, through learning and protecting these Indigenous practices that hold such reverence and respect for nature. And there's many ways. What can we do as a collective? What can we all do, knowing that we are all interconnected? What can we do to apply these lessons of interconnection to our everyday lives? How can we, knowing that our actions have an impact on a greater whole, move through life with conscientiousness and love to ensure that we are leaving a positive impact on the world? One analogy that I often like to think of is that of the butterfly effect, where seemingly insignificant flap of a butterfly's wings can ripple on to create a tsunami on the other side of the world. Now, as a student of the Shikibo, I would like to leave you with an ikaro, a medicine song that is specifically designed to help us connect with our family, with our community, with our ancestry. And now I would like to invite everyone to be comfortable in your seats, relax, regulate your breathing, just be present, listen with this, not this, listen with your heart.